Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Tori and Ren YouTube channel. This is part 2 of the 2-part sewing tutorial for the Compact Foldable Card Wristlet. If you haven't seen part 1, you can find it linked down below in the description box, but we're going to get started straight away with the next steps. If you sewed along during part 1 of this video tutorial, you should be at this stage here. We have just completed our top stitch along fold lines A and B for both of our print A card pocket pieces. You will have also prepped your wristlet strap toward the beginning of part 1. We're going to set this aside again and continue working on our exterior. Working with one print A card pocket piece at a time, I'm going to start with this one and then you're going to repeat with the other one on the other side. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be forming the card pockets. So we're going to be bringing our fold lines to the corresponding pocket placement lines. So starting with fold line B, we're going to bring it up to pocket placement line B, and if you have to redraw your markings because you used an erasable marking pen and they came out, you can do that now. So you're going to bring that pressed edge with your top stitch up to that marking, and you'll have some fabric folded underneath that's actually for our card pockets or our cards to fit inside. You can grab pins or quilting clips and clip it in place on both sides. You're then going to take it to your sewing machine and you're going to machine baste it in place. When I machine baste, I typically use 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. That's so it doesn't get shown later on when I do my actual seams to close the wristlet. Then once that's clipped in place and machine basted, you're going to bring fold line A to pocket placement line A just below the other one. So right over here. Okay, and you're going to machine baste this one as well on both sides. So I'll be back once it's basted, and I'm going to repeat the exact same thing over on this side. So once we basted the sides, it'll look something like this. You're then going to get your erasable marking pen, and we're going to mark the middle of this top edge up here. So I like to do it by folding it in half, or you can use your ruler, measuring tape, or cutting mat to measure. So I just find that center. I'm going to crease it and mark it. So there's my center. Then I'm going to do the same thing along this joining seam. I'm going to fold it in half. So bringing these side seams together on the end and making sure they're aligned with each other. So mine are aligned, and then right over here is my center, so I'm going to mark it here. Then what you're going to do is you're going to draw a line from this line to this line all the way down to connect them. That way we know where to sew our seam. So I have my ruler, and I'm just going to draw the line. And usually when I draw this line, I still like to have kind of a baseline over here. I line it with an edge that I know should be pretty straight. I line it up, and then I'm going to draw my line to connect them. And again, make sure you're using an erasable marking pen because this line will be removed later. Then what I like to do is I like to measure the distance from here to here and here and here. Make sure it's the same, and then mark down that distance right here so I know that this top edge is straight right across. So I just did a little dash under here to mark where this edge needs to go. Then because I know about here and here is about 1/2 inch apart, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to mark 1/2 inch from this top outer edge down. And that's where I know this edge needs to go. So that edge needs to go there and that edge needs to go there to make sure my card pockets are straight all the way along. So once you have those markings, you're going to line it up. You can actually use pins here and here if you'd like. You're then going to sew from up here. You're going to sew from fold line B all the way down to the bottom here, just before the joining seam. You're going to make sure to backstitch here, here, and over here, because as you use these card pockets, the seam is going to have a lot of wear right in the middle there and right at the start right here. So you want to make sure it's nice and secure. Like I said before, once you're done this center seam, you're then going to machine baste the sides here and here completely closed. So I'm going to do that here to this piece, and you're going to repeat to the other one. It'll look like this when it's complete. The card pockets are now complete. You can now go ahead and erase those markings made with the erasable marking pen on both pieces. You can also add some cards to these card pockets just to make sure everything fits correctly before going any further. We're now going to set this aside and begin working on the flaps. Taking our two print C pieces that measure 6 by 7.5, we're going to fold them in half with right sides facing by bringing the 7.5-inch edges together, just like so. The sides will now measure 3 inches. You're going to sew across these sides using a 1/4-inch seam allowance to close it. You're not going to sew across the top edge here, and you're going to repeat the same thing with this piece. So fold in half and sew the sides closed. The sides are now closed, so we're now going to turn them inside out from that top open edge, just like that. And you can grab a tool or even a knitting needle. I like to use a knitting needle to push those corners out to make them nice and sharp. So the corners are pushed out for all of my pieces. They're nice and sharp. Then what you're going to do is you're going to take both of them to the iron. You're going to press the pieces, and then you're going to sew a top stitch along the side, down the bottom, and then up the other side, leaving this top edge open for both pieces. Once the top stitches are complete, the card pocket flaps will look something like this. You'll have one for each set of card pockets. Then what we're going to do is we're going to find the middle of that raw 7-inch edge of the flap, and the top edge here from our card pockets, it should measure 8 1/4. Then what you're going to do is you're going to center one flap with each set of card pockets, so one over there and one over here. Making sure that it's nice and centered, you can add some quilting clips or some pins to hold it in place. You're going to machine baste across to secure on both sides. Something I do want to quickly note before we machine baste those in place is you want to actually pay attention to the direction of the flap pieces. You want to make sure that the side where the direction is correct faces out, and the side where the direction is upside down faces in, so faces the card pockets. That way when it's closed, the direction will be correct, and when it opens, the direction will also be correct. So just make note of that for both of your pieces. Now that the flaps have been basted to the card pocket pieces on both sides, we're going to begin installing our snaps. So for these steps, you're going to need an erasable marking pen for your markings. You're going to need your 6 sets of snaps and your snap installation tool of choice. That can be pliers, a press, whatever you prefer. I'm going to be using a press. Now for marking our snaps, the pattern templates actually include some of the markings. So for example, piece D here, which is the card pocket flaps, it actually includes the snap locations for the cap and socket for the flaps. So if you fold this in half and align that seam allowance with the outer edge, since we did sew the flaps in, you can actually copy the markings over. If you prefer, you can also trim off the seam allowance so you can align the edge of the paper with the edge of your flap as well. So you can copy those markings over. Piece B and piece A also include markings of where to add your snaps. Now, if you don't have the pattern or prefer to manually mark, I will be providing those measurements. I typically prefer to manually mark things because as you sew, things generally do shift and sometimes they shrink or they stretch depending on how it's sewn. So sometimes I prefer to manually mark things just so that I can get more of an exact marking. So I am going to tell you the measurements of each of the set of snaps where they're located. So for example, on your flaps here, you're going to have 2 snaps per flap. It's going to be the cap and socket, and that's the exact same for this flap and the other flap. So this marking in here for your cap and socket is actually 3/4 of an inch in from the bottom edge and 3/4 of an inch from the side edge. And that's the same for over here and the other 2 on the other flap. So you can go ahead and manually mark those or copy it from your pattern piece template. For the snaps on your card pockets, the snaps are again all the same, and they're 1 inch and 3/8 in from the outer edge and 3/8 down from that folded top stitched edge. So I have my marking there. You can repeat for over here and the other two card pockets on this side. So you can see I have my markings here and here. Now for the card pocket base, the markings are again all the same. They're 2 1/4 inches down from that joined edge right in here, and 1 1/4 inches in from the raw outer edge over here. This edge should be about 12 inches. So that's where you're going to mark one location here. Do the same over here, down from the joined edge and the raw edge. Same thing over here and over here. So all 4 are the same for each of the sets. Now for your flaps, you're going to be installing caps and sockets. So the cap on the outer exterior facing side, so caps over here, and the sockets inside here. For the card pockets, you're going to be installing your post and your stud. The post will go in through the back and come towards the exterior, and the stud will go right on top so that this closes properly. Over here, you're going to install a cap and a socket over here and over here. The cap will go from the wrong side toward the right side, and the socket will be on top here, so it'll be visible on the exterior. And then over here, because these snaps are actually set, you're going to install your remaining post and stud here and over here. The post again will go through the through the wrong side toward the exterior. So you'll insert it from the back and you'll add your stud on top and you'll install them there. Now you will require something sharp to make a hole in the locations of our snaps. I'm going to be using a quilter's awl, but there's various tools that you can use, and that's so that our cap and our post can go through our fabric so that we can install our sockets and studs on the other side. We're now going to begin installing our snaps, starting with the ones on the base. So what you're going to do to all 4 markings is you're going to get your quilter's awl or whatever you're using to make your hole, and you're going to push it through on that marked location to make that hole. I'm going to do it to all 4. Then on the wrong side, you're going to get your snap reinforcement pieces. So that's piece L. You'll have 8 1.5 by 1.5 inch squares of your cotton woven interfacing or your SF 101. And you're going to fuse 2 squares in each location. Because we pushed it through, you can actually see them now on the wrong side where those holes are. You're going to interface 2 of these in those locations. I'm back from fusing the interfacing in place. You can see I have 2 squares per location. And what we're going to do is we're going to flip over to the right side, making sure our change pocket is out of the way and it won't get pierced. We're going to re-pierce these holes with our quilter's awl. So I have mine here, my awl. I'm going to just go to where those holes already were and just re-pierce it through. Okay, so these are ready for their snaps. Again, cap and socket, post and stud. So taking my cap and socket, I'm going to go to the location where I want it. I'm going to put the cap on the wrong side and push it through that opening or that hole that we made, just like that. And then I'm going to grab my press and the compatible dies for these snaps. So I have my press and the adapter. So I'm going to add my dies. This is for the cap to sit in. It'll go on the bottom. And this is for the socket and it'll go on the top. The socket will be pushed inside here. So then what we're going to do is we're going to put our cap on that bottom part for the cap. So it'll sit in there properly. So just like that. It's going to be a little bit tricky to see. So it'll look like that. Then I'm going to take my my socket, and because I want this side facing out, I'm going to put it in the die like this. So it's in there now. So I'm just going to put a lot of pressure. The camera will shake, just a heads up. There we go. So that's one part installed. So that's the wrong side and that's the right side. We're now going to add, since we have the dies in here already for our cap and socket, we're now going to add it to our flap. We're going to add one here. So with taking my awl again, I'm going to go to that marking and I'm going to make that hole again. Another cap and socket here. I'm going to put the cap again from the exterior toward the interior, just like so. I'm going to repeat the same process, put my socket in here, flip this over, and add it in here. And that's what that snap looks like, and you're going to repeat for all of the ones on the flap here. I'm now going to go ahead and install all of these, and I'll show you what it'll look like, and then we'll do the post and studs. They're now installed, so I have my cap and socket here on the flap, on this one as well, and then over here. We're now going to switch our our press to these dies. This is for the post, it will go on the bottom, and this is for the stud, it will screw in at the top. Starting with one of these, we're going to insert our post from the wrong side toward the right side through that hole that we made. Just like that. We're going to add it to our press here. This pointy part of the die should go inside the center of the post. And this ball part of the stud right here will actually go inside the other die. Okay, and you'll repeat the same thing right here. We're now going to add one of them here. Taking the post and stud and our quilter's awl, we're going to pierce that hole here. And something I do want to note, before you pierce the holes, or the markings, sorry, you're going to want to make sure that when your sockets, so when your snaps close here, they actually land in the places where your markings are. As you can see, mine do line up with my markings, so my markings are in the correct location. But depending on sometimes how we sew something, or things stretch, move, again, this could also not land in the correct location. You may need to adjust yours. So just double check that before you add your snap, because the last thing you want to do is add that post and stud and then it doesn't close. You want to make sure it'll close properly. So I'm just piercing through that first card pocket, not both and not that back part. I'm going to take my post, and the post on this part is always a little bit trickier to get through. Sometimes I have to re-pierce that hole a couple times to get it through. You're going to put it in through the wrong side. So I've just pushed that post through, and then I'm going to do the same thing as before. I'm going to line it up with my die here, just like that, and then add my stud on top. Some of the snaps do click when you put it on top. The sets I'm using right now don't. Okay, so it'll look like that, and then you're going to repeat with this one, this one, this one, and this one. Again, double checking that the snap locations are in the correct spots. All of the snaps are now installed. It's starting to come together. We're now just going to double check that everything closes properly by closing all of the snaps. And bringing these two together and closing them here. So everything closes properly. And if you notice any of your snaps are loose in any spots, you can go ahead and tighten them before we sew everything else. Okay, it all works properly. So I'm going to grab my zipper tape now. With that same exterior piece and a remaining piece of zipper tape, I'm just going to divide it in half like so. You're then going to center 1/2 of tape with each 8 1/4 inch side of the exterior, with the right side of the zipper or teeth facing the right side of the fabric, over there, and then over here. Now what we're going to do next is, once the zipper tape is aligned on both sides, you're going to flip over to the interface side, so on this side, and you're going to sew across using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And if you'd like, you can use some quilting clips to hold your zipper tape in place while you sew. Once that's sewn across on both sides, you're going to grab your print D pieces measuring 4 3/4 by 8 1/4. These are piece G, and you're going to align one piece. You're going to align the top 8 1/4 inch edge of one piece with each end of your zipper. So one over here and one over here. Your zipper will be sandwiched in between the exterior and the lining, with the right side of the lining, I'll show it over here so you can see it, with the right side of the lining facing the back of the zipper. Then once these are aligned, you're going to flip back over to the interface side, and you're going to sew again across in line with the same seam you had just sewn to secure the zipper to the exterior. So in line with that same seam, and you're going to repeat with this side as well. Once the lining and zipper are attached to the exterior, it'll look something like this. We're now going to open them up by bringing the wrong side of the lining to the wrong side of the exterior on both sides. Then we're going to open up the card pocket flaps on both sides and sew a top stitch across here. I already did mine. And when doing your top stitch, you have two options. You can sew right across just like so, catching both the exterior and the lining, or you can lift the lining up like I did and just sew your top stitch on the exterior. Now, the reason we can do that for this particular project is because the way this is sewn and because of the distance of the lining from the zipper, the fabric will actually not interfere with opening and closing the wristlet, so it's completely up to you how you choose to do your top stitch. Taking the print B piece that measures 1 3/4 by 1 3/4, this is our D-ring tab or piece C. We're going to flip over to the wrong side, and taking an erasable marking pen, we're just going to mark the middle of the left and right sides, either using your cutting mat, ruler, or even by folding the piece in half like so and marking that middle. With your double-sided tape, you're going to apply 2 pieces, one on each side of that middle, so right across. Okay, just like that. Then you're going to bring the outer top and bottom edges into the middle. So the raw edges will meet in that middle, and it'll be stuck down to the tape. Okay, it'll look something like that. And if you don't have double-sided basting tape, you can also use quilting clips on the ends here and here to hold the folds in place. Then what you're going to do on this side here, you're going to sew a top stitch on both sides. Once sewn, your D-ring tab will look something like this on both sides. We're then going to insert our D-ring, so we're going to slide it through like this so that the side with the open raw edges will be toward the bottom straight side, so that when this is folded and sewn in, that actually won't be visible. Taking the exterior and the completed D-ring tab, we're now going to machine baste it in place. So on the side chosen to be the front, you're going to open up the flap, and you're going to align your folded D-ring tab with fold line A. So this bottom edge should line up with fold line A on the right side, and you're going to machine baste it in place, making sure to only catch the exterior and not the lining. So you're going to want the lining to be folded up here. The D-ring tab has now been basted in place. We're now going to get our remaining zipper pull and insert it into the zipper. When inserting our pull, you want to make sure you make note of where your D-ring tab is. You're going to want your zipper to close toward the D-ring so that when the wristlet is worn, the weight of the items inside won't put pressure on the pull because it'll be closing upward, not downward. So we're going to insert our pull from the left side toward the right side. We're going to slide it all the way through to close the tape, and then we're going to reinsert it and leave it in the middle. Now, when adding your zipper pull, you're going to want to insert a little bit of tape into both sides of the pull. It almost has like a rail on each side where you can slide the tape into. Then when it's even, you're going to tap your pull in. My pull has just been slid in a little bit. And when inserting your pull, you want to make sure that the fabric here and here of your exterior both align right across. Then you can pull your pull all the way through. You can also check on this side that they align right across. I'm going to reinsert the pull over here. Okay, so it's nice and even just like before. I'm now going to push my pull through. And as you can see here, I have an even amount of tape on both sides. There isn't more tape to one side than the other, so I know that my pull was inserted evenly and correctly. If there was more tape to one side, you could pull your pull out and retry again until it's nice and even here in the middle. But now that that's inserted, we're going to go ahead to our machine and we're going to machine baste right here and over here to hold our tape closed. The zipper tape has been basted on both sides, and this will keep the tape from separating when we turn to the wrong side and as we keep sewing. I also trimmed off some of the extra zipper tape that I had on both sides and just applied some fray check, but the fray check is optional. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to find the middle of your print bee base by bringing these joining seams together. So just like so, and you can mark the middle on the wrong side using either a marking pen or by cutting a small little triangle that goes in no further than 1/8 of an inch. So a tiny little triangle to mark the middle on both sides. So again, either a marking pen on the wrong side or a teeny triangle. And you want to make sure it doesn't go in any further than 1/8 of an inch because our seam allowance is 1/4 of an inch and you don't want to cut too far in and then you have no more fabric here. So you want to make sure it's a really tiny little marking. So now that that's marked, we're going to flip to the wrong side from the open sides. Just like so. And we're going to start by bringing that middle marking to the center of our zipper tape. So if you see on this side, if you used a marking pen, your marking will be here. You're going to bring it to the center of your zipper tape like so, and you're going to secure it there and right over here. And another thing you may want to also do is if you chose not to catch your lining when you did your top stitch, you may also want to spread your lining like this, so it's pushed away from the zipper, and sew right across here just to hold your lining away from the zipper on both sides. So you can actually do this when you secure your zipper to the center of the print bee piece. So I'm going to go and do that now to mine. Now that that's been basted, it'll look something like that. You're going to grab your print D piece that measures 9.5 by 8 1/4. It's piece F. And we're going to align it on top with right sides facing. We're going to separate the side with the change pocket. We're going to separate the exterior and the lining, just like so. And what we're going to do is we're going to sew from just before the zipper down. We're going to pivot. We're going to leave an opening of about 3 inches. And then we're going to keep sewing this way, turn again, and stop just before the zipper. So we'll do that to the lining. Then for the exterior that's separated, so the same side, we're going to make sure our change pocket is out of the way. We're just going to sew the sides closed from just before the zipper down here and just before the zipper down here, making sure to backstitch at your card pockets here, over here, at this joining seam, and at the bottom because these are the corners. Okay, so you're going to do that here and here. I'm back from sewing that close. So here on the lining, you can see I have that opening on the 8 1/4 inch edge. I sewed the sides closed, so just before the zipper, so about 3/4 of an inch out from the zipper. And then you can see here that the lining and exterior are separate, and the sides of the exterior were sewed separately. Now for transparency, I did accidentally sew mine closed on the side with the D-ring and not the side with the change pocket. I wasn't paying attention and went straight to my sewing machine and sewed that side instead, but that's completely fine. I'm not going to take it apart because I don't want to compromise the faux leather since I backstitched a million times and I might make a hole if I try to take it apart. So I'm going to leave it as is, but we're going to continue with the next steps. So what you're going to do on the other side is you're going to bring the remaining 8 1/4 inch edges of your lining together with right sides facing. And you're separate from the exterior, you're just going to sew across, right across here. Now that the remaining 8 1/4 inch sides of our lining are closed, this is the side opposite to the opening. We're going to realign those raw unsewn edges of the lining and exterior together here and over here. And we're going to sew our sides closed. I'm going to show you what to do over here, and then you're going to repeat on the other side. So what you're going to do is you're going to make sure that all of your edges are aligned and it's nice and flat across. Then you're going to start sewing a little bit on top of the seams here, the sides that we sewed separate. You're going to want to make sure that they're aligned so you can actually fold the lining back, and you can see that the seams are aligned here. Can fold it back over, and you can start your seam here, making sure to backstitch and sew all the way across, backstitching on your zipper, your card pockets, the joining seam where the lining is here, and the corner here. Those are all important areas to backstitch. And the reason we want to make sure we sew on top of this seam slightly and catch both of them is we want to make sure there's no areas that are left open. You don't want to leave a small hole anywhere. You want to make sure you catch this seam on both sides. So I'm going to go ahead and sew this side and this side. The sides are now closed, so our wristlet is now ready to be turned inside out from that opening in our lining. Before we do that, we're going to trim any threads. We're going to maybe give it a lint roll, do any trimming or fray checking that you need to do, and then you can turn inside out. So mine's all ready. You go in here, and when turning inside out, I'm first going to go to my zipper and open it up. Find my pull. Oh, I'm closing mine. So you're going to open it up, and then you can actually go to the corners. Pick a corner. I'm going to pick this one and start there with turning it inside out. Okay, so once you get to about this point here, you're going to grab a point turner or a knitting needle, and you're going to push out these corners from your opening. And because of how this is sewn, you'll have some nice sharp corners. And from your opening, you can also adjust the change pocket lining to make sure that the lining goes downward toward this side and not upward toward that side. So from the opening, I'm just going to flatten the lining just before I close it. You can also use your hand inside the change pocket lining to make sure it's all flat and smooth. And the next thing to do is to close the opening in the lining. So you're going to take it to the iron and you're going to press the raw edges of your opening inside so that this edge is nice and flush, just like this. You can sew across here close to the edge by machine to secure, or you can hand sew your opening closed. I'm going to tuck mine in. So once it's done, you just tuck it in. Make sure your lining is neat on both sides. And you can close this up and actually press some of the fabric parts, not the faux leather, faux suede areas, just the fabric parts. Here is my wristlet all pressed and open flat. I added some cards in here so you can see they're nice and snug in their pockets. And then on the back, we have our change pocket. We can put our change in. We can now close it by bringing our snaps from our base together on both sides here. And we can adjust in here on both sides. All that's left now to do is our wristlet strap. Taking our wristlet strap piece, I removed all of the quilting clips from before. What you're going to do is you're going to open the 3.5 inch ends right there, and you're going to align them with right sides facing. You're welcome to add quilting clips or pins across here, and you're going to sew across using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now the finished size for these wristlet straps is about 7 1/4 from here to the inner seam and about 8 from here to this inner edge right here. Now the reason it's nice and long is sometimes when you go shopping, you don't always want to keep your wristlet right at your wrist. You want to slide it a little bit higher. If you're doing something in the grocery store, at a clothing store, and you're looking at things, sometimes it can get hard to always keep it right here. Now it's a little bit longer so that you have the freedom to slide it just before your elbow and it'll still fit. Now, if you want to do something I thought about is if you want to have the option to have it tight to your wrist and also have it nice and long to be able to slide over here when you're doing stuff, you can actually add one of those same fashion spring snaps right over here. You can kind of measure it based on where your wrist is. And you can actually snap it closed when you want it tight to your wrist and snap it open when you want to slide it and have that freedom to move it around. That's just an option, but I thought I would recommend it. But if you do want a shorter one, you're more than welcome to trim this down and sew it in smaller. Just measure it based on your wrist. Now I'm going to keep mine as is, and I'm going to go ahead and sew these ends together. This is what that seam will look like. I actually sewed mine twice just to make sure it was nice and secure. You're then going to press your seam open at the iron, so just like that. Once it's pressed, you're going to refold everything back up using those creases from before. So just like so. It'll form a loop just like this with your swivel hook. You can take it back to the iron and just repress those folds, and then you're going to sew a top stitch on both sides, starting with the open side followed by the folded edge. And as you sew those top stitches, you're just going to gradually move your swivel hook out of the way. Once you've top stitched all the way around on both sides, you're going to bring your swivel hook to that joining seam right there. And you're going to sew as close as you can to the swivel hook, making sure to backstitch. So I just sewed straight across right over here, then attached the wristlet strap to the completed wristlet. And this is what mine looks like. I'll open it up for you one more time. That's the change pocket one more time. And here is the exterior all opened up. So I really hope you enjoyed this sewing tutorial. If you did, please give this video a like. I would also love to hear your thoughts about this project in the comments because I love hearing from you guys. But that's all for today's video, so I'll see you all next time with a new sewing project.